Security footage from a hospital in the occupied West Bank shows what appears to be Israeli forces disguised as civilian women and medical workers storming the hospital and killing 3 Palestinian men. Today's dramatic raid underscored how deadly violence has spilled into the territory from the war in Gaza. A hospital spokesperson said there was no exchange of fire, indicating that it was a targeted killing. Sarah Coates has more.
Sources from inside Ibn Sina Hospital in Jenin say the undercover Israeli team entered the facility at around 5:30 a.m. local time, going room to room, before shooting dead 3 young Palestinian men who were asleep in their beds. According to the IDF, the men, 2 brothers and another person, were part of an armed Hamas group and were plotting an attack on Israelis similar to that of October 7. Hamas responding, saying the Israeli army's crimes will not go unanswered. Sarah Coates, Tel Aviv.
Meanwhile, Israel's military has announced that it will review the shooting of a Palestinian man who was killed in the Gaza Strip while walking in a group of people waving a white flag. It said footage of the episode raised concerns of possible wrongdoing by soldiers. The video shows a group of 5 men walking down a street west of the southern city of Khan Yunis. The men hold their hands in the air and one waves a white flag. Suddenly, shots ring out, killing one member of the group. The shooter is not seen in the video, but beforehand the camera showed what looks to be an Israeli tank positioned nearby. The citizen journalist who filmed the episode said that an Israeli tank fired on the group. European Union member states have agreed to use billions of euros worth of profits from frozen Russian assets to rebuild Ukraine after the war. Ishan Garg has more.
EU officials estimate 15 to 17 billion euros could be generated from frozen Russian assets for Ukraine, though the member states have not decided on a mechanism for the funds to be utilized or on a plan to deploy it. They have agreed to use the proceeds as part of their efforts to support Kyiv. More than 190 billion euros worth of Russian assets are held in Europe. EU officials are considering absorbing windfall profits from Russian assets into a separate budget for Ukraine. Analysts say simply passing the assets off to Kyiv would be legally complicated and risky. To help Ukraine's war efforts, the EU is also working on passing a 50 billion euro package to mark the 2nd anniversary of the Russian aggression. Ishan Garg, Brussels.
An enemy drone that killed 3 American troops and wounded dozens of others in Jordan may have been confused with an American drone returning to the U.S. installation. That's according to 2 U.S. officials who were not authorized to comment and insisted on anonymity. The official said preliminary information suggests the enemy drone that struck the installation, known as Tower 22, may have been mistaken for an American drone that was in the air at the same time. The officials add that as the enemy drone was flying in at a low altitude, a U.S. drone was returning to base. As a result, there was no effort to shoot down the enemy drone. A Pakistani court has convicted former Prime Minister Imran Khan of revealing official secrets and sentenced him to 10 years in prison. It is the latest in a slew of cases that supporters say are meant to sideline the imprisoned former cricket star just days ahead of a parliamentary election. The Islamist politician was ousted in a no-confidence vote in 2022. He is not on the ballot because he is already serving a 3-year prison term, and more than 150 other cases are still pending against him. He nonetheless remains a potent political force because of his grassroots following and anti-establishment rhetoric. Hong Kong has begun a public consultation on enacting its own national security law, beginning a process to implement legislation that for years was widely opposed by residents who feared the end of civil liberties. Charles de Ledesma reports.
Beijing imposed a national security law on Hong Kong in 2020 and a crackdown on dissent followed. Both the Hong Kong and Beijing governments have hailed the law for restoring stability, but the basic law, Hong Kong's mini-constitution, requires the city to enact its own national security law. Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee welcomes the move.
I think eventually when people see that this law will bring security and also stability, they will love it.
Lee adds, we'll be confidently and rightly telling the world we're just protecting ourselves from attacks. The public consultation period begins on Tuesday and will end on February 28. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
The Illinois Election Board is scheduled to consider whether to keep Donald Trump on the state's primary ballot after a recommendation he be removed over the Constitution's insurrection provision. Today's meeting of the Illinois State Board of Elections comes a little more than a week before the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments in a similar case from Colorado, where the state's highest court found the 14th Amendment barred the Republican former president from the ballot over his role in the January 6 attacks on the U.S. Capitol. The Illinois Election Board is split evenly between Democrats and Republicans. If the vote is tied, the effort fails, and Trump's name would remain on the ballot. I'm Scott Baba for Pacifica Radio.